So, good morning, everyone. I would like to begin this morning by speaking to you just for a few minutes about my decades-long friendship with Amal Kiran, who was the one who wrote out or typed out Savitri for Sri Aurobindo. And, of course, pestered him with many questions. Amal and I'm wearing the robe he gave me now. And I want to share with you something about him briefly and about Savitri. He stuttered badly for most of his life. And when he spoke to me and when he recited Savitri, he never once stuttered. I thought that was extraordinary. He had a great sense of humor, and we corresponded for years with me asking him questions about Savitri. So today I want to share with you just a few things he said on how to read Savitri. Quote, "Read slowly, with an awareness that there is a meter, i.e. long syllables, short syllables, and a combination of them. Meter means that there is a design, a pattern, and the fact that the poetry is divided into lines means that each line has to be felt in a certain shape. So there must be a short pause after each line, even if the sense of the line continues into the next. Poetry means there is meter. Meter means a certain pattern of long syllables and short syllables. It also means that each line stands by itself with a certain pause, whether long or brief. Savitri is special in its meaning and message. It has a certain rhythm. It has a certain rhythm, which is at the same time like all other poetry, and with a subtle difference. And its special character makes it what Sri Aurobindo calls overhead poetry. That is, poetry which comes from planes of consciousness above the mind. Sometimes the sense is dependent in a delicate way and with a subtle point on the way the line is read, in tune with its distinctive character. An example, a cry to clasp in all the one God hush. Now mark the change which comes when the line is read as a cry to clasp the one God hush in all. In the first example, it is as if something is definitely said. But if one read the line as a cry to clasp the one God hush in all, it is as if in the first version, we have to discover the one God hush. In the other version, the one God hush seems a self-evident truth, and it is a truth which is not to be found, but as if it were self-existent. When we scan the two slightly different arranged lines, we feel that in the first case, a definite fact is stated. In the other case, we feel there is a subtle revelation beyond what is actually stated. So I thought that would be nice to share with all of you. It's so important to Savitri, this feeling of rhythm, and how we have to be so conscious of every line. So we begin. And we begin with the last line of page 8. And Edith, you haven't read for a while. Could you begin for us?
Against?
Yes.
Yeah. against the evil at life's afflicted roots, her own calamity, its private sign. Of her pangs she made a mystic, poignant sword. Would you like me to go on?
I think a little bit more, yes.
A solitary mind, a worldwide heart, to the lone immortal's unshared work she rose.
Now, we are still speaking of Savitri. In the maybe we could say the intermediate stages of her life, because Sri Aurobindo will go on more about this on page 9. So, against the evil at life's afflicted roots, her own calamity, its private sign. Now, I put calamity in the lexicon because it's more than just what we understand as calamity. I have 2 definitions for it. One is an event that brings terrible loss, lasting distress, or severe affliction, a disaster. Number 2, dire distress resulting from loss or tragedy. Obviously, Savitri, by descending into the human form, has made a tremendous sacrifice. And the calamities she has to face are our human calamities. But what she does is, of these pangs in her, she makes a mystic, poignant sword, because she has a solitary mind, a worldwide heart, and therefore, to the lone immortal's unshared work, she rose. So we are beginning to see that she's just rising to this unshared work. And what is the immortal's unshared work? Well, when we go through all of Savitri, we know that she has to defeat death. And not only does she have to defeat death, but she has to bring to the world, to the earth, the divine life. And she has to transform those who are ready into supramental beings. So it's a huge work. And the private sign of her own calamity, she makes a mystic, poignant sword of these pangs that are in her heart. But it's a solitary mind and a worldwide heart. And therefore, she is the one who, of course, and Sri Aurobindo, rises to the lone immortal's unshared work. And then we can begin to see that this is more the child Savitri, the young Savitri, because at first life grieved not in her burdened breast. And on the lap of earth's original somnolence, inert, released into forgetfulness, prone it reposed, unconscious on mind's verge, obtuse and tranquil like the stone and star. So we see that this childhood of Savitri, life is not grieving there yet. although her breast is burdened, and she knows that she has a work to do in life, because from the age of 5, she has known that. But still, Mother says until the age of 14, I believe, that the child's mind is not developed enough to understand these subtleties of language and feeling. So, on the lap of Earth's original sleep, we can say, this sleeping Earth, it's inert. It's released into forgetfulness, because when the soul takes birth in a new body, there is tremendous forgetfulness. And it can only come back if it's needed for one's individual progress. These things of past lives, Mother does not give too much attention to. She says it basically builds up the ego if we know we've had different lives. So she's clear on that. And so it's prone and reposing on unconsciously on the verge of mind. And then that beautiful line, obtuse and tranquil, like the stone and star. There's such a tranquility in the stone. And I think I've quoted to you once before Khalil Gibran's statement, the only difference in me and the stone is the speed of our heartbeats. A beautiful line. So she's very, very quiet at this point, and we'll see what happens next. Vladimir, would you read for us?
Yes.
Before we read, I had
Yes.
a question around of her pangs. She made a mistake. Poignant sword. Poignant generally means sad, right?
Pardon?
Poignant. It generally means, I mean, the meaning is sad. Or so here, I didn't quite get that line
The word
here.
of poignant is yes. Of her pangs.
The second line of page 9.
Of her pangs, she makes a mystic poignant sword. Poignant is, how would we call it? I can give you the exact definition, but it's intensely felt. Poignant. Here we are. Poignant, piercing, incisive. It could be agreeably intense or stimulating, but this is not the case here. Sharply distressing or painful to the feelings. So it is piercing and incisive and intense that she makes this mystic, poignant sword of her pangs. So she's putting it, she's focusing it, she's focusing this calamity and these pangs into a mystic, poignant sword. Because she's Savitri, she can do all of this at once. It's amazing that we, in our lifetimes, have found someone who could do all of this, who would have a worldwide heart. And now we will see what happens next.
Yeah, there is something here also, it's private sign, which is actually making me think all the time. And I can't figure out, I can intuitively feel that what it means, but truly speaking, wanted to check with you. What is this
surely.
Private sign?
Yeah, but you see, we have to go back to against the evil of life's afflicted roots.
Right.
Then that calamity, she makes her own private sign.
She's
that evil.
privatizing it. Yes,
Yes, exactly, because no one else can handle this but Savitri.
She
No
makes
one
it
else.
personal with it. She engages herself like
well, she's the Divine Mother.
right.
Only she can do it.
Right, that's what it means. Great, thank you.
Okay, so you'll begin with.
Actually, I just wanted to make a comment too, if I could, there on that poignant sword. So when you read that, it makes it sound like she is preparing for some sort of fight or battle. And the force behind that sword, right, is her pangs, if you will, or her calamity.
Yes, that's very good, and we're going to see much more of that in the next page, just before the end of the canto, because then it tells us how she has to wrestle with these forces, these universal forces, and it's Sri Aurobindo calls them the ancient disputants. These are the forces who have chosen to, well, I don't want to say go against the will of the divine, because they have their purpose also. Maybe they have chosen.
That is their purpose, yes.
To challenge us,
right.
To make us, to press us to move forward. I prefer to see it like that. So, yes, we can see it that way.
Yeah, there is something also with this poignant sword. Interesting thing about that the sword is seen usually as something like force, yes, but the power of knowledge. And it's quite interesting because when Jesus says, for example, also that I don't bring you the knowledge, I bring you the sword. There's a statement of Jesus. The sword is actually the power of knowledge. So to say, build on experience, mother, interaction with these, evil, afflicted roots, and this calamity which she privatized and made her own, accepted, embraced it. On that experience, she built the knowledge, effective knowledge against these forces. And this is the sword, a sharp sword, which can pierce and can change things.
Yes, but the sword itself is dormant until it's in the hand of the wielder.
Right. Right. But it is in her hand. It is that sword, yes.
Exactly. Exactly.
Not in anybody else's hand. Yes.
Not in anyone else's hand, no.
Right. Okay, so let me then read further a little bit, yes? Yes.
In
At
a
first.
Deep cleft. In a deep cleft.
Okay, sorry. In a deep cleft of silence twixt two realms, she lay remote from grief, unsown by care, nothing recalling of the sorrow here. Then a slow, faint remembrance, shadow-like moved, and singing and sighing, she laid her hand upon her bosom and recognized the close and lingering ache, deep, quiet, old, made natural to its place, but knew not why it was there, nor whence it came.
Yes, so there we are. Remembrance, not remembrance.
Okay, remembrance, yeah.
Yeah, there's no burr in there, there's no E there. Remembrance. That's an important one. Now, there are a lot of things to cover here. This deep cleft of silence, a cleft in the earth is like an abyss or chasm. It's a deep chasm or cleft of silence twixt Sri Aurobindo was questioned, why did you use twixt always instead of between? Well, first of all, between has 2 syllables. Twixt has 1.
Mm.
And even though it's considered by Oxford to be an antiquated word, it works perfectly. Everything Sri Aurobindo has chosen, every word he has chosen in Savitri has been as a result of a seeing or an experience. We can be certain of that because he said it in his letters. So in a deep cleft of silence, twixt 2 realms, she's between 2 realms now. She's between the heavenly realm from which she came and this earthly realm of all of its problems and horrors and filth and everything else. But here she's remote from grief. She's a child yet. She's still in her childhood phase. She lay remote from grief, unsawn by care. I asked Aurobindo Basu about this word, unsawn, because it's really not in a dictionary except in the sense of not cut. But that's basically the idea, not cut through by care, unsawn by care. I do have it in the lexicon also, but I don't think I have anything else to tell you on that one. We can look at it, unsawn. An interesting word that he uses here. Okay, unsawn. Not cut or divided as by a saw. So she's not divided by care because she doesn't recall any of the sorrow here. The mind is not active yet. The mind is too young yet. Then a slow, faint remembrance, shadow-like, moved like a shadow over her. And sighing, she laid hand upon her bosom and recognized the close and lingering ache, deep, quiet, old, made natural to its place, but knew not why it was there, nor whence it came. Again, she's still young, and she's experiencing this first entry into life and its afflicted roots and the pangs that she has to deal with her solitary mind. But she goes to the immortal's unshared work. She rises to it. But then he takes us back a little bit and tells us that at first life is not grieving in her burdened breast. And it's sort of on the lap of Earth's original sleep. It's inert. It's released into forgetfulness because it's too much right now. Savitri has to go through so much to conquer death. I mean, there are pages and pages when she's arguing with death and eventually, of course, conquers him. So she's remote from grief. She's not deeply cut into by care, and she doesn't recall anything of the sorrow that is here. So he gives us that much, that she still doesn't recall any of it. But what happens then? Because here ends with a period. So then he takes us to a new feeling in Savitri. And that is a slow, faint remembrance that is moving like a shadow. And that remembrance She knows, because she sighs and lays her hand upon her bosom, and she recognizes that close and lingering ache that is deep, quiet, old, made natural to its place. Now that's an interesting line, made natural to its place, that close and lingering ache, because its place is what she has to conquer, what she has to deal with, she has to live with. And we're going to see much more of that when we go out of this first book. Actually, the first canto, because the next canto is extremely powerful, all about Savitri and what is happening. So Sri Aurobindo is almost giving us an entry into Savitri and telling us that she doesn't know why it was there, nor whence it came. This is a close and lingering ache that she doesn't know why it's there, and she doesn't know from where it came, because the power that kindles mind was still withdrawn.
The power that kindles mind was still withdrawn. Heavy, unwilling were life's servitors, like workers with no wages of delight. Sullen, the torch of sense refused to burn. The unassisted brain found not its past.
So we see that the mind is not fully active yet in the child. And the power that kindles mind is still withdrawn. And as I told you, Mother said it takes quite a number of years before the child's mind can comprehend more difficult things, more obtuse, challenging things. Life's servitors were heavy, unwilling, and this beautiful line, like workers with no wages of delight. We don't think of a worker usually having a wage of delight, but it's a fantastic line, because these servitors of life, these workers of life that are heavy and unwilling, because they're like workers with no wages of delight, and therefore sullen, the torch of sense refused to burn, and the unassisted brain found not its past. Well, that's sort of quite understandable at this age of Savitri. A vague earth nature held the frame. Well, it all holds us when we're born. As a young child, actually the mother has to hold us in the formative months. And then eventually we begin to crawl and slowly to stumble and take a step and finally to walk and then to run. So here we have only this vague earth nature is holding her frame. And then something happens. Elisha, could you read that next?
Only a vague earth nature held the frame, but now she stirred. Her life shared the cosmic load. At the summons of her body's voiceless call, her strong, far-winging spirit traveled back to the yoke of ignorance and faith, back to the labor and stress of mortal days, lighting a pathway through strange symbol dreams across the ebbing of the seas of sleep.
Yes, and we can see here how only someone with the vision and the experience of the highest planes, as Sri Aurobindo, could write something about lighting a pathway through strange symbol dreams across the ebbing of the seas of sleep. We've already seen these Earth's original somnolence, and now we have the ebbing back and forth of the seas of sleep. So now she stirs. Her body stirs. Her life shared the cosmic load. At the summons of her body's voiceless call. Pardon? Sorry, I didn't hear that. Oh. At the summons of her body's voiceless call, her strong, far-winging spirit traveled back. Where did it travel back? Back to the yoke of ignorance and fate. Back to the labor and stress of mortal days, lighting a pathway through strange symbol dreams across the ebbing of the seas of sleep. So she stirs, and her life begins to share the cosmic load. Period. At the summons of her body's voiceless call, so the body is calling her now, voicelessly, her strong, far-winging spirit then travels back. And what does it travel back to? And Sri Aurobindo uses back 2 times in a row to emphasize how important this is. Back to the yoke of ignorance and fate. Well, we've spoken of the yoke many times, I think, but it's good to say it here. With a yoke, we're always tied. The 2 oxen are tied to a yoke. We are tied to the yoke of ignorance and fate. And she goes back to the labor and stress of mortal days. But how does she do this? She lights a pathway through strange symbol dreams across the ebbing of the seas of sleep. We should concentrate on that for a few moments. Many have found pathways through dreams or in trance or in realization. But to light a pathway is a totally different thing. Only Savitri can do this. And as Mother said, I have been with you since the dawn of civilization. I'm paraphrasing, but she has always been with us. And Sri Aurobindo said he was always there carrying on the evolution. So she's lighting a pathway through strange symbol dreams across the ebbing, the back and forth of the seas of sleep. And we'll go a little bit further. Radhe, could you read a little? If there are any questions prior to that. So beginning with her house of nature.
Her house of nature felt an unseen sway, illumined swiftly where life's darkened rooms, and memories' casements opened on the hours, and the tired feet of thought approached her doors.
So Savitri's being feels an unseen sway. Notice that nature is capital N. Nature is capital N. So her house of nature felt an unseen sway. Well, I think our house of nature is her physical body. Her house of nature felt an unseen sway, and illumined swiftly were life's darkened rooms, and memory's casements opened on the hours. You know the casement for the window? You open the window there, the casement is there, and you can open the window. So it opened on the hours, and the tired feet of thought approached her doors. So we have the casements, we have the doors, the tired feet of thought. Tired feet of thought. Isn't that an extraordinary statement? That our thoughts are sort of tired and worn out, so to say. The tired feet of thought approached her doors. So we have her rooms, her doors, the casements, all three things, her house. See, it's a whole house, isn't it? House of nature, darkened rooms, casements opening, and the doors. So there's actually a feeling here of her house of nature, feeling this movement, a sway. When something is swaying in the wind, it's moving in the wind. And memory's casements opened on the hours, and the tired feet of thought approached her doors. These lines are just so filled with illumination, touched by perfect beauty. And I think probably that's enough for today, because then she has to meet with all these ancient disputants and giants on next Sunday, and we will complete the canto next Sunday. If there are any questions on the whole passage, because we did virtually almost a page today, certainly don't hesitate to ask. I thank you all for coming and joining us in this most magical experience of Savitri, when we want to look at each line for its beauty, its music, and its mantra. Namaste all.